My name is Agatha Price, and I'm 74 years old. I'm not the kind of old lady who sits in a rocking chair and knits scarves for her grandchildren. I have a grandson, an only grandson, Liam, my Hugo's son. But we rarely see each other, and when we do, the boy stares into a clipboard like I'm a ghost from the last century with nothing to talk about. My house in Conway is not a mansion, but it's not a wreck. I paid off the mortgage 15 years ago, shortly before I quit my job. 20 years at Funders Bank taught me a lot about budgeting, investing wisely, and never letting anyone else manage your money. No one but yourself. I started as a simple teller and ended up as head of the credit department. The banking system does not forgive mistakes and weaknesses, but generously rewards those who understand its subtleties. I did. When I left, the manager, Clifford Jensen, personally shook my hand and told me that such specialists are still to be found. Clifford is retired now, as am I, but we call each other occasionally. The old guard has to stick together. Hugo wasn't the same 20 years ago. He called often, came up on weekends, consulted on everything. I helped him with the down payment on his apartment. I gave him money to pay for his college tuition. What else do you need parents for? He went on to become a climate engineer, and I was proud of him. It was modest at first, but things started to pick up. And then Jenna came along. I can't say I didn't like her right away. Tall with a straight back and a flawless manicure. She worked as a receptionist at a plastic surgery clinic, though what that had to do with her education as a psychologist, I don't know. At first, Jenna was a sweetheart. She called, inquired about my health, even sent Christmas cards. And then Liam was born, and everything changed. First, they stopped coming every week, then every month. "We have a baby, Mom, you understand?" Hugo said. I did. I offered to help with the baby, but Jenna always found a reason to say no. "He just fell asleep. He's teething. We were just about to go to the doctor." I slowly accepted that it wasn't my destiny to see my grandson. When Liam turned 5, they started coming more often, but they weren't polite visits anymore. They came when they needed something. "Mom, remember when you said you'd help with summer camp for Liam?" Hugo was sitting on my couch, fiddling with a cup of coffee. I always make his coffee special with cinnamon. He used to appreciate it. "Of course I remember," I replied, though I didn't really remember the conversation. "Anyway, we found a great camp. Educational. A language camp." "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. "You can't go without languages these days." "Yeah, but it's, not very cheap." Hugo looked away. 8,000 a shift. I almost choked. 8,000 for a kids camp? "It's an elite camp, Mom," Jenna interjected. She was sitting in her chair, her back straight as if she'd swallowed a ruler. "Not everyone gets in. We had to go through an interview process." "Liam's 5 years old. What interview?" "Not with him, with us," Jenna said impatiently. "It's important that the parents share the same values." "Well, Mom," Hugo interrupted, giving his wife a warning glance. "We've paid in advance, but we need 5,000 more by June 1st. "When is June 1st? I asked, even though I knew it was 3 days before the 1st of June, and they knew that I knew it too. "Monday," Hugo replied grudgingly. And you came here today, Friday, to ask for 5,000 for a camp I've never heard of?" "Mom, we talked about it. You just forgot." "I don't forget anything, Hugo." I looked him straight in the eye. "Especially when it comes to this kind of money." "You're going senile," Jenna cut him off. "It's normal at your age." I turned to her. "I may be old, but I can still keep a day planner and remember what I'm talking to my own son about." "Look, Mom." Hugo set the cup on the table with a loud clatter. "We need that money. For Liam. For your grandson. You keep saying you want to be involved in his life. Here's your chance. Through extortion?" I didn't recognize my own son. "What happened to 'Hey, Mom, how's your blood pressure?' Or 'Mom, would you like to come over for dinner on Sunday?'" Hugo sighed with the look of a man explaining obvious things to a child. "We're very busy. I have projects, Jenna has clinic, Liam has daycare and classes. We don't even have time to sleep." But there was time for a trip to get the money. Jenna stood up, tugging on her perfectly pressed blouse. "I told you this was a waste of time. Let's go, Hugo." "Wait." Hugo rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Mom, we really need this help. I'll pay it back at the end of the year when I get my bonus." I looked at my son, at his expensive watch and fancy haircut, and thought about how much had changed in him. Once he used to just come over, make me tea and tell me about his projects, not caring whether I understood anything about heat exchangers or not. Now he was sitting in front of me with his hand outstretched and nothing but irritation in his eyes. Okay, I said finally. I'll help, but I have to go to the bank. I'll meet you tomorrow. Hugo's face brightened and Jenna snorted. Can't you just wire the money? I prefer cash, I said firmly, especially when it comes to that kind of money. They left 10 minutes later. Hugo kissed me on the cheek, but I felt it was just a formality. Jenna didn't even say goodbye. I wired the money to Hugo's account that same night. Not because I believed the camp story, but because I still loved my son and hoped my gesture of goodwill would make a difference. I didn't hear from them for the next few months. I called on my own, but the conversations were short and awkward. We're doing fine, Mom. Liam's growing up. There's a lot of work, not much time. Not a word about how camp went or if Liam liked it. When I asked about it directly, Hugo blurted out, yeah, it was great. He learned a lot. For Christmas, I got a card from them. Just a card, no gift, no invitation to a holiday dinner. And it was signed, Merry Christmas, Hugo, Jenna, and Liam. Not even Grandma or Mom, just a formality. I'm not one to complain about fate. I've lived long enough to know that people change and not always for the better, even if those people are your children. But that realization didn't take away the pain. In the spring, they came again. This time it was about repairs to their house. Can you believe they charged us $20,000 for the kitchen alone? Jenna sipped tea from my best cup. That's a ripoff. Renovations are expensive, I agreed. But why do you need a new kitchen? You renovated it 3 years ago. Mom, you're confused, Hugo interjected. We bought the house 3 years ago. The kitchen is old, from the previous owners. I remember exactly what you told me about the new kitchen, and you showed me pictures. Jenna rolled her eyes and whispered something to Hugo. He nodded. Mom, he began patiently, we showed you the project, what we wanted to do, and now we're finally getting our act together, and our money. I remained silent. I really could have gotten something mixed up. At my age, my memory sometimes fails me, but not that bad. Anyway, Hugo continued, we're short on the final payment. The contractors want a deposit. How much do you need? 10,000. Hugo was careful not to look me in the eye. We'll pay it back in a couple months when I get paid for the current project. I sighed. Hugo, I already gave you 5,000 for the camp. I don't mind helping out, but I wish you'd at least come once in a while just for fun, not for the money. We don't have time for frivolous visits, Jenna said. We work, unlike some people. Jenna, Hugo said warningly. What? She blurted out. Your mother's living off her pension and savings, and we have to work our asses off. Liam needs a better education, a better environment, and she's counting pennies. I'm not counting pennies, I said calmly. I just want some respect and gratitude. Oh, so now we have to bow at your feet for handouts? Jenna stood up, eyes glittering. Let's get out of here, Hugo. I told you there was no point in going to her. At the end of fall, the first cold rain came. I'd always loved autumn, its calm colors, the smell of fallen leaves, and quiet evenings with a book by the fireplace. Arthur, my late husband, used to joke that I was the only person who enjoyed gray, rainy days. That's because on such days, the whole world becomes like a bank, I laughed. Quiet, orderly, no fuss. Arthur only shook his head but smiled. Arthur died 15 years ago. A heart attack. It happened so quickly that I didn't even have time to say goodbye. He'd gone to work in the morning, he taught history at the local college, and I'd gotten a call from the hospital in the evening. We had 38 years together, and every day I am grateful for that time. After he died, Hugo started coming more often. He was different then, caring, attentive. He was afraid that I would fall into depression, and he tried to entertain me. He took me to concerts, to restaurants, just came to talk. Once he even talked me into going camping. It was a disaster. I got my feet wet, caught a cold, and then lay with a fever for a week, but we laughed a lot remembering this story. In those days, I could see Arthur's features in him. The same tilt of his head when he listened to a conversation partner. The same way of rubbing the bridge of his nose in thoughtfulness. And most importantly, the same openness to the world, the same genuine concern for people. It all seemed to disappear without a trace with Jenna's arrival. I'd been putting off my annual cardiologist visit for a long time, but I finally got it together and went to the clinic. Dr. Nabel examined me and found nothing alarming. "You're in great shape for your age, Mrs. Price, but I would still recommend that you reduce your exercise and take a course of medication to strengthen your heart muscle." He wrote a prescription, and I went to the pharmacy. The drugs were not cheap, almost $300 for a 1-month course. I could afford it, of course, but I still felt a nasty pang of anxiety. The pension wasn't that big, and expenses were rising. I decided to cut back a bit on other spending this month. In the evening, Hugo called. "Hi, Mom." I could sense the tension in his voice. "How are you?" "Good," I replied. "I had a checkup with the cardiologist today." "What did he say?" There was something like genuine concern in my son's voice, and I felt a surge of gratitude. "It was nothing. He prescribed some preventative medication." "What kind of medication?" Hugo asked warily. I named the medication. "Wait," he said. "I'll Google it." "Okay, I'm looking. Mom, these are expensive pills. Almost $300. "Yes, not cheap," I agreed. "But your health is more important." "Are you sure you need them? Maybe there are cheaper analogs?" I sighed. "Hugo, I have money for medicine. Don't worry about it." "It's not that." His voice became irritated. "You just have to be more frugal. Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow?" "I've always been frugal," I reminded him. "That's why I have a rainy day fund." And yet, he hesitated. "Look, Jenna and I have been thinking about this. You're 74, and it's not easy to manage your finances at that age. Maybe you could let me help you." "Help with what exactly?" I asked cautiously, even though I knew what he was getting at. "Well, I could take care of your bills, keep track of your expenses, help you shop, make sure you don't spend too much." "Spend too much?" I felt a wave of resentment rising in me. "Hugo, I spent 20 years in banking. I know more about finance than you'll ever know, and I'm perfectly capable of handling my own money." "Of course you are, Mom," he said conciliatorily. "I just want to help. You probably have other things to worry about besides bills and shopping." "Like what?" "Well, your garden, for instance, or your book club, or, I don't know, knitting." "I don't knit, Hugo. I've never knitted." It was just an example. He was getting more and more irritated. "The point is, as people get older, it gets harder to manage their finances. It's a scientifically proven fact." "Maybe so," I agreed. "But I don't feel any difficulty yet. When I do, I'll let you know." "By then it might be too late," he persisted stubbornly. "You might not realize that you're making unwise decisions. And someone could take advantage of that." "Like who?" "Scammers, salesmen, neighbors, anyone." There was genuine concern in his voice, and for a second I almost believed he was motivated by concern for me. Almost. "Mom, please let me at least look at your bank statements, just to make sure everything's okay." "No," I said firmly. "Thanks for your concern, but my finances are my finances. I'm doing fine." He sighed with demonstrative patience. "Fine, suit yourself, but think about it, okay? And call me if you change your mind." We ended the conversation on that note, but I knew the subject wasn't closed. My son has always been persistent, ever since he was a kid. If he wanted something, he wouldn't give up until he got it. It was a quality that had helped him succeed in his career. But now it was working against me. And I was right. A few days later, Hugo and Jenna showed up on my doorstep unannounced. Jenna was holding a large paper bag with the logo of an expensive supermarket. "Hi, Mom." Hugo kissed me on the cheek. "We were driving by and decided to stop by. How are you?" "Hi, Agatha." Jenna handed me a bag. "We brought groceries. We thought it might be hard for you to go to the store in this weather." I looked up at the gray November sky. It was overcast, but it was bearable. I could walk to the store on my own. "Thank you," I said, accepting the package. "That's very kind of you, but you know I have no trouble going shopping. I do it every day." "Every day?" Hugo was surprised. "Why? You can shop for a week at a time." "I like going out," I explained. "It gives me a reason to walk and talk to people." "At your age, you need to conserve your energy," Jenna said authoritatively. "What if you slip or your blood pressure spikes? Who's going to help you?" I suppressed a sigh. I had a phone, and you two weren't the only ones on my contact list. But let's not talk about that. Tea? We went into the kitchen where I unpacked the package I'd brought. It contained expensive organic produce I'd never bought before: quinoa, goji berries, flaxseed oil, and not a single familiar product. Not the tea I love, not the cookies, not my favorite cheese. We decided to revamp your diet, Jenna said, noticing my confusion. It's all so much healthier than what you usually eat. And how do you know what I usually eat? I asked, trying to stay calm. Well, we looked in your refrigerator last time, she said nonchalantly. It was full of cholesterol and sugar. At your age, that can lead to serious health problems. I pressed my lips together to keep from saying something harsh. Instead, I put the kettle on and took out the cookies I'd baked yesterday. Thank you for your concern, but I'm quite happy with my diet. Dr. Nabel didn't find any health problems, except some minor age-related changes. Mom? Hugo looked at me with an expression I remembered from his teenage years, a mixture of annoyance and condescension. You do realize that doctors don't always tell the truth to elderly patients, don't you? They don't want to upset them. Dr. Nabel has known me for 30 years, I replied calmly. He's never kept the truth about my health from me, and if he had tried, I would have noticed. Jenna rolled her eyes. Of course you know best. I ignored her tone and poured the tea. We sat at the kitchen table, talking awkwardly about the weather and the news, until Hugo suddenly changed the subject. Mom, Jenna and I wanted to talk to you about your expenses. I set my cup down on the table and straightened up. About my expenses? Yes. He pulled a folded piece of paper out of his pocket. We looked at your bank statements. You did what? I couldn't believe my ears. How did you get access to my statements? Hugo was confused. Well, when you were sick last year and asked me to pay a couple of bills, I saved your account information. For emergencies. I remembered I'd actually asked him for help when I came down with a bad cold. I never thought he'd use it like that. It's an invasion of privacy, I said, trying to keep my voice even. And I didn't give you permission to monitor my spending. We're doing this for your own good, Jenna interjected. You spend too much. On what exactly? I crossed my arms over my chest. Hugo unfolded the sheet. Here, look. Last month you spent $300 at the bookstore. $300 on books, Mom? Who buys paper books nowadays? I do, I answered. I like to read, and I prefer paper to e-books. It's a waste of money, Jenna said flatly. All books can be found for free on the internet. It's called piracy, and I don't support it, I said. Besides, it's my money. I earned it through hard work, and I have the right to spend it as I see fit. Hugo continued. Then you wired $1,000 to some Clifford Jensen. Who's that? My former colleague and good friend, I explained. His grandson was diagnosed with leukemia, and the family needed money for treatment. I decided to help. You gave $1,000 to a stranger? Jenna looked like I was confessing to a felony. That's fraud. He must have tricked you. Clifford's not a stranger. We've worked together for 15 years, I said coldly. And his grandson is really sick. I've seen the medical records. It's not hard to forge documents, Hugo said. I felt anger boiling up inside me. This condescension, this attitude, as if I were a feeble-minded old woman who couldn't tell the truth from a lie, was driving me crazy. Hugo, I said, trying to remain calm. I've known Clifford for almost 40 years. I've held his children in my arms. I've been to his wife's funeral. And yes, I'm sure that his grandson does have leukemia and that the money will go toward a cure. Even if that's true, Jenna interjected, why should you give your money away? Doesn't he have any other relatives or insurance? Because I can help, and I want to help, I replied. And I don't need to explain my decisions to you. You do if those decisions affect our future, Jenna blurted out. I turned to her slowly. Your future? How does my spending affect your future? Jenna faltered, realizing she'd said too much. Hugo gave her a warning look. Mom, he said, trying to smooth things over, we're just worried that you're spending too much. At your age, you need to be more frugal. At my age, I repeated slowly. Hugo, I've been in this world for 74 years. I've lived through recession, inflation, financial crises. I ran the credit department of a bank when you were still learning to tie your shoelaces. And you dare tell me to be fiscally prudent? Times have changed, Mom, he said stubbornly. Things are different now, and you're not 25 years old enough to throw money around. I don't throw money around, I replied, feeling my patience wearing thin. I spend as much as I can afford. We want to make sure that. Hugo held out his hand. Give me your bank cards. I'll give you the money you need to spend. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What? Your cards, Mom, he repeated, as if he were talking to a child. We'll feel better if we control your spending. It's for your own good. I looked at Jenna. She was looking at me with a look of complete superiority, like she was already anticipating her victory. No, I said firmly. I'm not giving you my cards. In fact, I think it's time for you to leave. I'm tired of this conversation. Mom, don't be stubborn. Hugo was getting impatient. We're trying to help you. I don't need that kind of help. I stood up from the table, indicating that the conversation was over. Please leave. Okay, Hugo stood up too, his face flushed with anger. But we'll come back to this conversation. And next time you won't be able to avoid it. They left, slamming the door. I sank back in my chair, feeling my hands shaking. What was happening to my son? When did he become such a stranger? After that visit, I'd been even more careful. I changed all my passwords, ordered new bank cards, and asked him not to send me statements in the mail. I even transferred some money to a new account at a different bank that Hugo and Jenna didn't know existed. It was a reassurance, but I felt it was necessary. In early February, I discovered that the roof on the house was leaking. After several days of heavy snowfall, a wet spot appeared on the ceiling in the living room. I called a handyman who inspected the roof and came to a verdict. Serious repairs were needed. How much would it cost? I asked, mentally preparing myself to spend a lot of money. About $5,000, he replied, if you do it properly. You could, of course, just patch the hole, but that would be a temporary solution. I decided not to skimp on the repairs. The house was my biggest asset, and keeping it in good condition was a wise investment. I called the bank to transfer the money from my savings account to my current one, and agreed with the foreman to start the work in a week. In the evening, the phone rang. It was Hugo. I told him about the problem with the roof. He started to argue that the price was too high and offered to find a cheaper repairman. I declined, saying I had already made a deal. Hugo insisted that he and Jenna come over tomorrow, just to talk. The next day, they arrived with grim, determined faces. Hugo immediately started talking about my spending, and Jenna declared in the living room that I was squandering Liam's inheritance. My inheritance? I said slowly. Have you divided my money yet? Mom. Hugo put his hands on my shoulders. Understand, we don't want you to spend it all on frivolous things. We want Liam to have a future. And I don't have a future? I threw his hands off me. I'm supposed to live a life of starvation, denying myself everything so you can have as much as possible after I'm dead? Don't get ahead of yourself, Jenna snorted. No one's talking about starving. But $5,000 to fix the roof? $1,000 for a sick grandson? $300 for books? That's unreasonable spending. I looked at my son, trying to find something of the boy I'd raised, but all I saw was cold calculation. You want me to exist, not live, I said quietly. You want me to sit in four walls and wait to die, saving every dime for you. You're being dramatic, Jenna said. We want you to be reasonable. No, you want to control my money, and I'm not going to let you do that. You don't have a choice. Hugo pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket. We went to a lawyer. He said we could file a petition for your incapacity. Given your age and irrational spending, the court will appoint me as your financial guardian. I felt the ground slipping from under my feet. They're going to declare me incompetent. You wouldn't dare, I whispered. We would if we had to, Hugo said firmly. But we don't have to go to court. Just give us your bank cards and your checkbook. We'll give you money to cover your expenses. And if I refuse? Then we'll file a complaint with the court, Jenna intervened. And we'll tell them how you gave $1,000 to someone you don't know, and you're going to throw away $5,000 on unnecessary repairs. Hugo, I said, trying to get through to him, That's money I earned. I've been saving it all my life, denying myself a lot of things. And now you want to take that opportunity away from me? We want to protect you from spending too much, he repeated, and to protect our family's future. No, I said firmly. Do what you want, but I'm not giving you control of my money. Hugo sighed heavily as if he'd expected that answer. Jenna, see where her bag is. What? You're going to search my house? I couldn't believe my ears. We're going to take what we have to take, Hugo replied coldly. For your own good. Jenna returned with my bag and shook the contents onto the table. My wallet fell out among the items. She grabbed it and opened it. Aha! She exclaimed triumphantly, pulling out my bank cards and a wad of cash. Look how much money is in here. I actually kept about $500 in cash in my wallet out of old habit. That's my money. I tried to break free of Hugo's grip. Give it back right now. Why do you have so much cash? He asked demandingly. Don't you trust banks? I've worked in a bank for 20 years. Of course I trust them. But having a small amount on you is a reasonable precaution. $500 isn't a small amount, Jenna objected, counting the money. It's irresponsible. You could get mugged. The only robbers I see are you two. I broke free of Hugo's grip. Give me my stuff back. No. Hugo took the cards from Jenna and put them in his pocket. We'll leave you with $100 for running expenses. That's more than enough for an elderly woman who hardly ever leaves the house. You have no right to take my cards. I held back from crying. Yes, Hugo said firmly. As your next of kin, we have a duty of care to you, even if you don't realize it. Jenna put $100 on the table and hid the rest of the money in her bag. It's better for everyone. We'll come every week and bring everything we need. What if I need money for something urgent? Call us. Hugo answered simply. We'll decide if it's really a necessary expense. You'll regret it, I said quietly. Regret what? Protecting you from your own poor judgment? Jenna snorted dismissively. I don't think so. Mom, it's for your own good, Hugo repeated without sincerity in his eyes. You'll thank us again. Never, I said firmly. And you can forget about the roof repair. I'll cancel it. Of course you will, Hugo nodded. And you'll return the deposit. You can use that money for more important things. Like what? Liam needs a new tablet for school, Jenna interjected. And we're going to send him to a good camp this summer, educational. So that's what this is about, I get it. You don't want my money for Liam's future. You want my money for your current expenses. You just want to embezzle it. Don't be ridiculous, Hugo said. We're well off. Then why are you so eager to control my money? Because you'll have spent it all by then. Jenna couldn't take it anymore. On your stupid books and repairs and handouts to your friends? Exactly, Hugo said. We just want to keep what you've earned. For future generations. For ourselves, I corrected. Don't lie to yourself, at least. They headed for the exit, promising to come back in a week with groceries. What am I supposed to do? Scrounge? I asked bitterly. Don't be dramatic, Mom. Hugo opened the front door. You're not a beggar. It's just that your money is in good hands now. In the hands of thieves, I corrected. Because what you did was stealing, and you're gonna regret it. Threatening me? Jenna laughed. Threaten me with what? You gonna report me to the police? Tell them your son's taking care of you? Or maybe sue? With what money, old woman? You'll be begging now, as you should at your age. Those words hit me like a slap in the face. Not so much the words themselves, but that contemptuous tone. Jenna, stop it, Hugo told her, but without much enthusiasm. Mom, we're doing this in good faith. Someday you'll understand. They left, leaving me standing in the living room among the scattered items from my bag. I sank down on the couch, feeling my hands shaking. How could my son do this to me? I sat still, trying to comprehend what had happened. They had taken my cards, took most of my cash, left me with a measly $100 and promised to check in on me every week. They turned me into a hostage in my own home. My first impulse was to call the police. But what would I say? That my son took my bank cards because he thinks I'm incapable of managing my finances? That his wife insulted me? Would the police get involved in family matters? I remembered Hugo threatening to file a petition to have me declared incompetent. What if he actually did it? What if the court believes him over me? After all, I'm an old woman and he's a successful engineer in the prime of his life. No, I couldn't let them declare me incompetent. I couldn't let them take away the last thing I had left, my independence and dignity. In that moment, I realized that I would not just sit around and wait for their next visit. I would not be a victim. I would take action. I stood up and looked out the window at the snow-covered garden for a long time. My thoughts gradually cleared, giving way to cold determination. They had forgotten who I was. They'd forgotten that I'd worked at the bank for 20 years, that I knew the system inside out, that I have connections, knowledge, and experience, and that I never give up without a fight. I wasn't going to stoop to their level, but I wasn't going to let them control my life. I'm not going to let them take what I've earned through hard work, and I would make them regret the day they decided to humiliate their mother. A plan began to form in my head, clear, well thought out based on my experience and knowledge. I knew what to do, and I knew who to turn to for help. After Hugo and Jenna left, I gave myself a few hours to calm down. Anger and resentment were clouding my mind, and I needed a cool head. 20 years of working at a bank had taught me that emotions were a poor counselor when it came to serious decisions. I brewed a strong tea, settled down in my favorite chair, and began to draw up a plan of action. The first thing to do was to assess my resources. The $100 they'd left me didn't count, but I had a backup, a stash of cash that no one knew about. The old banking habit of keeping a safety cushion came in handy. In the jewelry box under the double bottom was $2,000, a sum that should be enough for the first time. I also remembered the debit card I'd opened at another bank 3 years ago and hardly used. The card was hidden between the pages of an old ledger in the study. Hugo had never looked on that shelf. The next step was to contact people who could help. And number one on my list was Shannon Baxter, my colleague from the bank, with whom we'd worked side by side for 15 years. Despite the age difference, Shannon was 12 years younger than me. We became good friends. After I retired, we kept in touch, though not as often as I would have liked. I dialed her number, secretly hoping it hadn't changed. To my relief, after the third ring, I heard a familiar voice. Shannon Baxter speaking. "Shannon, it's Agatha," I said, feeling my throat dry with excitement. "Agatha, what a surprise! How are you?" "We need to meet," I said, wasting no time with pleasantries. "I have problems." There was a short pause on the other end of the line. "What's wrong?" Shannon's voice became serious. "Not on the phone," I answered. "Could you come to my place?" "Sure. How about after work today? The sooner the better." "I'll be there around 6, she promised. I hung up the phone and looked at my watch. It was only 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There was plenty of time to gather my thoughts and paperwork before Shannon's visit. I pulled out all the bank statements, contracts, and house deeds I had. Fortunately, most of them were kept in a safe that was installed in the wall of the study behind the painting. Only Arthur knew of its existence, and after his death, only I knew. While I was sorting through the papers, the phone rang. Hugo's name came up on the display. I hesitated for a second, but I decided to answer it because it was important not to arouse suspicion. "Yes?" "Mom, it's me." Hugo's voice sounded unnaturally cheerful. "How are you?" "How am I supposed to be after what happened?" "Don't be so dramatic." He sounded annoyed. "We're doing this for your own good." "Of course," I replied dryly. "Look, I'm just calling to let you know that Jenna and I are going away for the weekend. We'll be back Monday night. Is everything okay? You have enough groceries?" "Yeah, I have everything," I lied, even though the fridge was almost empty. But the thought that they wouldn't show up until Monday filled me with relief. I'd have time to act without their interference. "Good, and don't think about spending all the money we left you on anything stupid," he warned. "Don't worry," I replied. "I will be very frugal." After the conversation, I went back to my papers, but now I had a new task. I had to write down this conversation and all future conversations with Hugo and Jenna. I remembered that somewhere in my desk drawer there must be an old tape recorder that Arthur used to record his lectures. When I found it, I checked that it was working and put it next to the phone. Now every call Hugo made would be recorded. At 6 o'clock that evening, just as promised, Shannon arrived. The years hadn't changed her. The same slender figure, the same lively eyes, only a few silver threads in her dark hair that showed her age. Agatha! She hugged me tightly. It's been so long since we've seen each other. Too long, I agreed, leading her into the living room. Thank you for coming on such short notice. When a former loan officer calls and says she's in trouble, I know it's serious. Shannon smiled as she took off her coat. Tell me about it. I told her the whole situation in detail. How Hugo and Jenna had gradually begun to control my finances. How they'd taken my cards and most of my cash today. How they'd threatened to declare me incompetent if I didn't comply. As I recounted, Shannon's face grew more and more somber. It's outrageous, she said when I was done. What they're doing is against the law. Financial abuse of the elderly is a serious crime. Financial abuse? I'd never thought of it in those terms. Exactly, Shannon nodded. Coercion, intimidation, taking property without consent are all forms of abuse. And the fact that your relatives are doing it doesn't change the point. What am I supposed to do? I asked. First and foremost, you need to protect what you have left, Shannon said firmly. You say you have a spare card and some cash? I nodded. Good. I need to open a new account at a different bank tomorrow, preferably one where Hugo doesn't have an account, and transfer some of the funds from the old accounts. But how? I don't have access to the old accounts. Hugo took the cards. We start by blocking them. Shannon pulled out her cell phone. I'll make some calls. She contacted someone at the bank, explained the situation, using professional terms I understood well, but which would sound like gibberish to the uninitiated. 15 minutes later, she hung up with a satisfied smile. Done. The cards are locked. Now we have to go to the bank tomorrow and issue new ones. I'll come with you. Thank you. I was very relieved. But what if Hugo filed a petition to declare me incompetent? He could get control of all my accounts. We'd need a good lawyer for that, Shannon thought. And I know just the person. Moira Keller, she specializes in elder law. She can help us put together a plan of action and protect you if it goes to trial. Court? I shuddered. The thought of having to sue my own son was unbearable. In a pinch, Shannon reassured me. But we need to be prepared for anything. I'll contact Moira tomorrow morning. In the meantime, let's think about what else we can do. We sat at the kitchen table until late into the night, plotting our course of action. Shannon proved to be a real strategist. She came up with a few ideas I never would have thought of on my own, like installing hidden cameras in the house to record Hugo and Jenna's behavior during their visits. If they try to take your money or documents again, we'll have proof, she explained. I'm not sure I'm ready for that, I admitted. It's my son after all. Agatha, Shannon took my hand. I understand how you feel, but this is no time to get sentimental. They broke the law by taking your cards. They're threatening to declare you incompetent without any medical justification. They're trying to control your life and your money. This is serious. I sighed. You're right. I just never thought it would come to this. Neither did I, Shannon said softly. Hugo always seemed like such a caring boy to me. What happened to him? Jenna, I answered briefly. She changed him completely. Or maybe she just brought out something that had always been hidden in him. We agreed that Shannon would spend the night at my place and then we'd go to the bank together in the morning. I made her bed in the guest bedroom and said goodnight, but I couldn't sleep for a long time. Thoughts of Hugo, of his childhood, of how he had gradually changed, kept me awake. Where had I gone wrong in his upbringing? What had I missed? Or was it not about me, but about the way the world works, where money means more than family ties? In the morning, Shannon and I had breakfast and headed to the bank. She suggested we not go to my usual bank, but to another bank where she had connections. It was safer that way. Less chance of Hugo finding out what I was doing. At the bank, we were met by a young manager named Ryan, whom Shannon apparently knew well. Mrs. Price. He shook my hand. It's nice to meet you. Shannon has told me about your situation. We'll do everything we can to help. We spent almost 2 hours at the bank. Ryan opened a new account for me, issued an express card, and helped me draft a statement about unauthorized access to my previous accounts. We also discussed the possibility of transferring some of the funds from my investment accounts to the new account. It's going to take some time, Ryan warned me, but we'll make it as quick as possible. In the meantime, I advise you to be careful with your spending. Don't use the new card for major spending until we're sure your son can't trace the transactions. After the bank, Shannon took me to see Moira Keller, the lawyer she'd talked about yesterday. Moira's office was in an old building downtown. Moira herself was an energetic woman in her 50s with a short haircut and shrewd eyes. "Mrs. Price," she shook my hand firmly. "Have a seat. Shannon briefly told me about your situation, but I'd like to hear all the details from you." I outlined the whole story again, this time in a more structured way, with dates and amounts that I could reconstruct from memory. Moira took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "It's a classic case of financial abuse of an elderly person," she said when I'd finished. "And the fact that your next of kin are doing it only makes it worse. What should I do if they do file a petition to declare me incapacitated?" I asked, voicing my biggest fear. "First of all, don't panic," Moira said calmly. "You need a good medical reason to declare a person incompetent. A simple statement from relatives is not enough. You'll need an evaluation, and if you're of sound mind, and I can see that you are, there's nothing to worry about. But they may misrepresent the facts," I said carefully. "Make me look wrong." "That's why we need evidence," Moira nodded. "Recorded conversations, written threats, other people's testimonies, anything that can confirm that you're being pressured." "I've already started recording our phone conversations," I said. "That's good," Moira approved. "I would also advise you to keep a diary of all interactions with your son and daughter-in-law. Write down dates, times, the nature of the conversation, their behavior. It could be very useful if the case goes to court." We discussed several other legal aspects, including the possibility of getting a protective order prohibiting Hugo and Jenna from coming near my house or having contact with me. It was a last resort I'd hoped to avoid, but Moira had insisted that I be aware of the possibility. "One more thing," Moira said as we were about to leave. "I recommend that you undergo an independent medical evaluation, a full examination, including a cognitive assessment. It'll be our insurance policy in case your son does file for incapacity. Do you think it will come to that?" I asked anxiously. "I hope not," Moira said honestly. "But it's better to be prepared for anything. And Agatha," she called me by my first name, "remember, you're not alone in this situation. You have friends, you have professional support. We won't let them take away your independence." That day I felt hopeful for the first time in a long time. Shannon and Moira didn't just listen to me, they believed me and offered me a concrete plan of action. I was no longer a helpless victim of circumstance. I had a strategy. When I got home, the first thing I did was to make a detailed list of all the accounts, cards, and investments I had. Then I started keeping a diary, as Moira had advised, writing down all the details of yesterday's conflict while they were fresh in my mind. That evening, Hugo called. "Mom, how are you?" His voice sounded wary. I turned on the recorder before answering. "Fine, how's your vacation going?" "Good." He relaxed a little. "Listen, I just remembered. You said something about fixing the roof. Have you canceled it yet?" "Not yet," I answered, trying to speak calmly. "The handyman's supposed to be here on Monday." "Mom," he sounded annoyed. "We talked about this. No repairs. It's a waste of money." "But the roof is leaking, Hugo. If we don't fix it, it's only going to get worse." "We'll find someone who can do it cheaper," he said. "Call the repairman and cancel the appointment. And if I don't want to, then we'll talk about it on Monday when we get back," he said, his voice clearly threatening. "And Mom, don't do anything stupid while we're gone. I'll check your spending accounts when I get back." "My accounts are locked," I said calmly. "After you took my cards, I called the bank and reported the theft." There was a long pause. "You did what?" His voice turned icy. "What I had to do." I tried to sound confident, though my heart was pounding like crazy. "Hugo, what you did yesterday was a crime. You took my cards without my consent. That's theft. We're your family." He was outraged. "We care about you." "Caring doesn't look like that," I said firmly. "And if you keep this up, I'm going to have to go to a lawyer." "A lawyer?" He laughed, but it wasn't funny. "With what money, Mom? We took your cards, remember?" "I remember," I said calmly. "But you must have forgotten who you're dealing with. I've worked in a bank for 20 years. You think I don't have a backup?" There was another pause. When Hugo spoke again, his voice sounded threatening. We'll talk about this on Monday. And Mom, if you did go to a lawyer, you've only hurt yourself. Because now we have proof of your paranoia and inadequacy. Perfect grounds for a declaration of incompetence. He hung up without waiting for my response. I turned off the recorder and took a deep breath. The conversation had gone exactly as I had expected. Hugo had threatened and intimidated, thinking it would work. What he didn't know was that I now had a recording of his threats, further proof for Moira. In the evening, Shannon arrived with a bag of groceries and a small hidden camera we had set up in the living room. She showed me how to use it and promised to be back on Monday before Hugo and Jenna arrived. You'll be fine, she said confidently, hugging me goodbye. You're stronger than you think, and remember, you're not alone. After she left, I felt strangely calm. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't a victim of circumstance. I had a plan, I had allies, I had a strategy. Hugo thought he was dealing with a helpless old woman who could be intimidated and controlled. He was sorely mistaken. I spent the weekend gathering documents and preparing for my upcoming meeting with Hugo and Jenna. Moira had forwarded a few legal documents through Shannon, which I scrutinized carefully. One of them was a statement revoking all the powers of attorney I had previously granted. I signed it and set it aside for filing on Monday. Sunday night, I called the roof repairman and confirmed his visit. Let Hugo think he can control my spending, but the house is my property and I will maintain it. I went to bed with a clear plan of action for Monday. For the first time in a long time, I felt not fear, but determination. Hugo and Jenna didn't know it, but they'd awakened the fighter in me that I'd always been a woman who'd made her way from simple cashier to department head, who'd survived the loss of her husband and learned to live again, who'd never given up in the face of adversity. They'll soon find out that the old bank wolf still remembers all her tricks, and I'll make them regret the day they thought they could take away my freedom and dignity with impunity. Monday began with the arrival of the roof repairman. I showed him the problem spot in the attic where the roof was leaking and we discussed the work plan. He promised to finish in a week if the weather held. I'd like to get the rest of the deposit today, he said, filling out the paperwork. The rest when the work is finished. I nodded and wrote the check. Moira had advised me to open a new checking account at another bank for just such payments, so Hugo couldn't trace or block them. After the handyman left, Shannon arrived. She brought me the new bank card she'd picked up at the bank with my power of attorney. Here you go. She handed me an envelope. I activated it on the way over. There's not much money in there yet, the $5,000 we transferred on Friday, but it should be enough for the first time. Thank you. I took the card with relief. I don't know how I would have done it without you. You would have, Shannon said confidently. You've always been strong. It's just that sometimes we all need a little help. We checked the hidden camera in the living room and set up another one in the hallway. I felt a little like a spy from the movies, but I understood the necessity of these measures. Hugo and Jenna should be here after 6, I said, looking at my watch. We still have time. Great. Shannon pulled out her laptop. Let's use it. I need to check on something. She opened the banking app and logged in using her corporate access. Is this legal? I asked cautiously. Not exactly, Shannon admitted, but I have authorization to check your accounts, so technically, I'm not breaking the rules. She took a quick look at my accounts, making sure all the security settings were activated and Hugo couldn't access them. Now, let's look at your son's accounts, she said as she entered the new data. You can do that? I was surprised. Not in theory, Shannon gave me a quick glance, but I have advanced access to investigate fraud, and technically what Hugo's doing falls under that category. She typed Hugo's name into the search box, and a few seconds later his account information popped up on the screen. That's what I thought, Shannon muttered as she looked through the data. Agatha, your son is up to his eyeballs in debt. What? I couldn't believe my ears. But he's always made good money, and Jenna works too. Look for yourself, Shannon turned the screen to me. On the monitor, I saw a list of Hugo's accounts with negative balances and several credit cards maxed out. A mortgage, 2 car loans, personal loans. Shannon scrolled through the list. And there's late payments everywhere. Sounds like your son's living beyond his means. I was stunned. Hugo always struck me as financially prudent. He chose engineering partly because of the steady income. How could he have gotten his financial situation so bad? Let's look at his expenses for the last 3 months, Shannon suggested. She opened his main card statement and we started looking at the transactions. The picture wasn't pretty. Expensive restaurants, name brand clothing stores, beauty salons, electronics. This is interesting. Shannon pointed to several large transfers to an unknown company. Sidewave Invest. Never heard of that one. She did a quick internet search. Yep, it's an investment company, specializes in cryptocurrencies and high-risk investments. Hugo transferred almost 40 grand to them in the last 2 months. 40,000? I couldn't believe it. Where did he get that kind of money? Good question. Shannon continued her search. Look, here's the source. A transfer from your investment account. I froze. But I didn't make those transfers. Technically, you did, Shannon said darkly. Or rather, someone using your data. Most likely Hugo. He had access to your accounts, remember? I remembered giving Hugo access to my investment portfolio a few months ago to help me understand the new account management system. It had seemed harmless at the time. Now I realized what a mistake I'd made. He stole my money? I whispered, still in disbelief. I guess so, Shannon nodded. And by the looks of it, he invested it in a very questionable project. Let's, look into this company further. She did a deeper search using her professional resources. After a few minutes, she leaned back in her chair with a grim expression. Sidewave Invest is under scrutiny by the Securities and Exchange Commission. There are suspicions of fraud and organizing a pyramid scheme. Several investors have already filed complaints. I felt my breath catching. My son didn't just take my money without asking. He invested it in a dubious venture that could end in a total loss of funds. Is there any way to get that money back? I asked. We'll try, Shannon said firmly. I'll initiate an investigation into the unauthorized access to your accounts. In the meantime, let's see what else he was doing with your money. We continued to review the statements. The picture was getting bleaker and bleaker. In addition to the transfers to Sidewave Invest, Hugo was using my money to pay off his own debts, pay for a vacation on a tropical island, and even buy a new car for Jenna. That explains why they were so desperate to get control of your finances, Shannon observed. They were already used to using your money as their own. I could feel the anger building up inside, mixed with the deep pain of betrayal. My own son, my own flesh and blood, the man I'd raised with love and care, was stealing from me to support his lavish lifestyle. I couldn't find an excuse for it. Wait a minute, what's this? Shannon pointed to another strange transaction. A wire transfer to Bradley and Associates, $12,000. She did a quick check on that firm online. They specialize in real estate and probate law. Agatha, have you ever done business with them? Never, I shook my head. Then why did Hugo wire them that much money from your account? Shannon frowned. Let me call them and find out. She dialed the firm's number and introduced herself as my financial advisor. Using my name and a few personal details I gave her, she was able to get the transaction information. After hanging up the phone, Shannon turned to me with a grim expression on her face. Agatha, they're preparing the paperwork to sell your house. What? I felt dizzy. But how? The house is in my name. Not exactly. Shannon touched my arm gently. Remember how you said you put a power of attorney in Hugo's name a few years ago? That power of attorney gives him the right to handle your assets, including the real estate. I remember. 3 years ago, when I suffered a minor heart attack, I had indeed executed a power of attorney on Hugo so that he could manage my affairs in case I couldn't do it myself. It seemed like a sensible precaution at the time. Now I realized what a terrible mistake I had made. They can't sell the house without my consent. I still didn't want to believe what was happening. Technically they could, Shannon said grimly. If Hugo has a general power of attorney, and from the looks of it, that's exactly what you had. I felt the ground slipping away from under my feet. My house, where I'd lived my whole life, where I'd raised Hugo, where every corner held memories of happy days with Arthur. They're going to sell it without even asking my opinion. What can we do? I asked, trying to remain calm. For starters, revoke the power of attorney immediately, Shannon said firmly. Moira has already prepared the documents, remember? We need to file them today. She glanced at her watch. The bank is still open. Let's go right now. We'll initiate a lockdown on any suspicious transactions on your accounts. We quickly packed up and drove to the bank. On the way, Shannon called and made an appointment with the manager we worked with last time. At the bank, Ryan was already waiting for us. He escorted us to a separate office where we could calmly discuss the situation. Mrs. Price, he began seriously, Shannon told me about your suspicions. We're going to conduct a full audit of all your account transactions over the last 6 months. If it's confirmed that your son was acting without your authorization, we can challenge those transactions. What about the money transferred to Sidewave Invest? I asked. Ryan frowned. That's more complicated. If the company is indeed engaging in fraud, the money may already have been withdrawn through offshore accounts. But we'll work with law enforcement to do what we can. I signed a statement revoking all powers of attorney granted to Hugo and documents to block suspicious transactions. Ryan also helped me install additional security measures on all of my accounts. Now no one but you will be able to conduct transactions on those accounts, he assured me. Not even with your credentials. When we were done with the banking, Shannon took me to a notary where I officially revoked the general power of attorney Hugo had given me. The notary, an elderly man named Gordon, listened sympathetically to my story. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon, he said as he processed the paperwork. Financial abuse of the elderly is becoming more and more common, especially by relatives. It's good that you have support. He handed me a copy of the revocation of power of attorney document. This document is effective immediately. Now your son will not be able to dispose of your property. But I recommend that you also contact the law firm that is preparing the documents for the sale of the house and notify them directly. The next 2 weeks flew by in a flurry of legal consultations, trips to the bank, and long conversations with Moira and Shannon. I didn't return Hugo's calls, sending him a quick message to say that we would only communicate through my lawyer. That didn't stop him, of course. He kept calling and even came to the house a couple of times, but I didn't answer the door. Moira turned out to be a real treasure. Not only did she help me revoke all the powers of attorney and draw up new documents, but she also contacted Bradley and Partners to stop the paperwork being prepared to sell my house. She also initiated an investigation of Sidewave Invest and filed a formal complaint with the SEC. I can't promise we'll get all the money back, she told me honestly, but we'll do what we can. And at the very least, stop these scammers from defrauding other people. Shannon, for her part, helped me open new accounts at another bank and transfer most of my savings there. We also set up a new security system where any major transactions required my personal presence at the bank, not just a password or code from a text message. Now Hugo won't be able to get to your money, Shannon said with satisfaction, even if by some miracle he finds out about the existence of those accounts. I also had a full medical examination, including a cognitive evaluation, as Moira had advised. The results were excellent for my age. No signs of dementia or other problems that might call into question my ability to manage my own finances. This medical report is our trump card if Hugo tries to declare you incompetent, Moira said, looking through the documents. But I doubt he'll go for it, especially after we discovered his financial fraud. By the end of the second week, I felt I was ready for a crucial conversation with Hugo and Jenna. Moira offered to organize a meeting in her office where I would feel safe and they would realize the seriousness of the situation. We'll also invite the bank representative, she said. It would show them that we had the support of official institutions. I agreed, and Moira sent Hugo a formal invitation to the meeting. To my surprise, he not only agreed, but insisted that the meeting take place as soon as possible. Perhaps he was still hoping to influence the situation or persuade me to change my mind. The day of the meeting came on a sunny Wednesday morning. I woke up feeling strangely calm. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel fearful or uncertain at the thought of the upcoming conversation with my son. I knew I was doing the right thing, protecting myself and my independence. Shannon picked me up at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we headed to Moira's office. On the way, we reiterated our plan. I would speak calmly and matter-of-factly without being provocative or letting emotion take over. Remember, you don't have to make excuses or explain your decisions, Shannon said. You're an adult of sound mind and judgment. You have every right to manage your money as you see fit. We were met at Moira's office by Ryan, the same bank manager who had helped me with blocking accounts and verifying transactions. He brought with him a binder of documents, the results of the bank's internal investigation. We've confirmed unauthorized access to your accounts, Mrs. Price, he said. Your son used your account details to transfer funds without your consent. This is classed as fraud, and the bank is prepared to support you if you decide to make a formal complaint. Let's talk first, I replied. Maybe we can resolve this without involving the police. At 11 o'clock sharp, Hugo and Jenna arrived. Hugo looked exhausted and nervous, Jenna angry and tense. They clearly hadn't expected to see not only me in Moira's office, but also Shannon and Ryan. What's going on here? Hugo asked, stopping at the door. I thought we were going to talk privately, Mom. Have a seat, Mr. Price, Moira said, pointing to the chairs across from her desk. As I explained in my letter, this is a formal meeting to discuss your mother's financial situation and some problems that have arisen recently. Hugo and Jenna reluctantly sat down. I noticed that Jenna was fidgeting with the strap of her expensive purse, the one I now knew they'd bought with my money. So, Moira began, opening the file. Let's get down to business. Mrs. Price came to me 2 weeks ago with a complaint of financial abuse by her son and daughter-in-law, specifically taking her bank cards without consent, threatening to declare her incapacitated, and trying to sell her house without her knowledge. That's ridiculous, Jenna exclaimed. We were just trying to help an elderly woman who is unable to manage her finances. Mrs. Price has had a full medical examination, Moira continued calmly, ignoring Jenna's outburst. Here are the results. She placed a folder on the table. As you can see, there are no signs of dementia or other cognitive impairment. Moreover, the doctors note her excellent memory and clarity of thought. Hugo took the folder and quickly flipped through the documents. His face grew more and more tense with each page. This doesn't prove anything, he finally said, slamming the folder shut. Senile dementia can manifest itself in different ways. Sometimes people seem perfectly normal, but they do irrational things. Like giving $40,000 to a shady investment firm? Ryan asked, joining the conversation. Or spending money on luxurious vacations when their accounts were minus. Hugo turned to him sharply. Who are you? And what right do you have to poke around in my finances? Ryan Foster, Senior Security Manager at Funders Bank, Ryan introduced himself. We are investigating unauthorized access to Mrs. Price's accounts. And yes, in the course of our investigation, we discovered that you used her credentials to transfer significant amounts of money to your own and third-party accounts without her consent. That's not true, Hugo was outraged. I have a power of attorney from my mom. I had every right to manage her accounts. A power of attorney gives you the right to act on behalf of the principal for the principal's benefit, Moira corrected him. Not for your own personal benefit. Using a power of attorney for personal gain is an abuse of trust and, in fact, fraud. Besides, the power of attorney was revoked 2 weeks ago, I added. So you have no rights to my money or property now, Hugo? My son turned pale and looked at me with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Did you really revoke the power of attorney? How could you do that to your own son? The same way you could steal from your own mother, I replied calmly, and plan to sell my house without my knowledge. We weren't planning to, Hugo started, but Jenna interrupted him. Oh, come on. They already know everything. Yeah, we were going to sell the house. It's too big for one old woman, and the taxes on it are eating up a lot of money. It'd be the smart thing to do for everyone. For everyone? I raised an eyebrow. Or just for you? Because I don't remember anyone asking my opinion on this. We'd explain it all to you later, Hugo mumbled, when everything was ready. When it was too late to change anything, I corrected him. But luckily, we were able to intervene in time. Moira opened another folder and pulled out some documents. These are the results of our investigation. In the last 6 months, a total of $112,000 had been transferred out of Mrs. Price's accounts without her knowledge or consent. $40,000 were transferred to a company called Sidewave Invest, which is under investigation for fraud. The rest of the money had been spent on Mr. and Mrs. Price's personal needs, including paying off loans, buying a car, paying for vacations, and buying luxury items. Jenna swallowed nervously. Even her usual self-confidence seemed to be shaken under the weight of the evidence. "We were going to pay it all back," she muttered, "when the investment paid off." Sidewave Invest was a pyramid scheme, Ryan said. They promised unrealistically high profits to attract investors, but in reality they were just redistributing money among the participants. It's a classic Ponzi scheme. There's no getting that money back. Hugo sat with his head down. I saw his shoulders slump. He looked like a man backed into a corner with no argument left. "What do you want us to do?" he finally asked. "Money? We don't have any. We're up to our necks in debt." "I want you to give me my bank cards back," I said, "and leave me alone." "That's it?" Jenna looked surprised. "No courts, no police, no demands for your money back?" "I'm not going to sue my own son," I said firmly. "Although, believe me, Jenna, I have every reason to. But I want you to understand one thing. I am not a helpless old woman to be lied to and controlled. I'm an independent person, in my right mind, and with every right to manage my finances. And I will not let anyone, not even my own son, take that independence away from me." Hugo looked up at me. "You really won't sue?" "Not if you return my cards and stop trying to control my life," I said. "But if you continue, I won't have a choice." Hugo silently took my bank cards out of his pocket and put them on the table. "Here," he said. "Everything I have." Moira checked the cards and nodded at me. "They're fine, but they're still locked, so you can't use them anymore." "We've also prepared a document," she continued, pulling out another piece of paper. "It's an agreement whereby Mr. and Mrs. Price agree not to make any attempt to control Mrs. Price Sr.'s finances, not to petition the court to declare her incapacitated, and not to approach her home without prior invitation. In exchange, Mrs. Price will not sue them for actions already taken." "Do I have to sign this?" Hugo asked, looking at the document. "If you want to avoid a lawsuit, yes," Moira nodded. "And so does Mrs. Price." She looked at Jenna. Hugo took the pen and signed the document without further objection. Jenna followed suit, though her face showed a fury she couldn't hide. "Well," Moira said when the formalities were over, "that concludes our meeting. Copies of the agreement will be mailed to you, Mr. Price, and remember, breach of this agreement will have immediate legal consequences." Hugo and Jenna stood up, preparing to leave. But before they left the office, Hugo stopped and turned to me. He hesitated as if he didn't know what to say. "I didn't mean for things to turn out this way." "But it did, Hugo." I looked him straight in the eye. "And it's not about the money. It's about the trust you broke. It's about the fact that you saw me not as a mother, but as a source of money. And that's a very painful thing to realize. Is there anything we can do to fix it?" There was a note of hope in his voice. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say yes, wanted to believe that we could repair our relationship. But the other part, the part that remembered the humiliation and betrayal, wasn't ready for that. "I don't know, Hugo," I answered honestly. "I'm not ready to even think about it right now. I need time. A lot of time." He nodded, accepting my answer, and followed Jenna out the door. When the door closed behind them, I felt the tension I'd been holding in all this time finally let go. My hands shook, and I gratefully accepted the glass of water Shannon offered me. "You did great," she said, squeezing my hand. "I'm proud of you." "We all are," Moira added. "Not everyone has the strength to stand up to their own children, even when they do wrong." Ryan expressed his admiration, too, and assured me that the bank would continue to investigate Sidewave Invest and do everything it could to recover at least some of the stolen money. As I left Moira's office that day, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness at the realization that my relationship with my son would never be the same again. Relief that the nightmare of the last few months was finally over and I had regained control of my life. Shannon offered to celebrate our victory, and we went to a small restaurant where we discussed my future plans over lunch. "What are you going to do now?" Shannon asked. "Are you going to go back to your normal life?" "Not exactly," I smiled. "You know, this whole thing got me thinking. I've spent so many years saving for a rainy day, living modestly, denying myself things. And for what? So my own son could spend it on expensive trinkets? No, it's time to live for myself." "And what does that mean?" Shannon looked intrigued. Remember when I always dreamed of traveling to Europe? To see Paris, Rome, Barcelona? I'm gonna make that dream come true. I've booked a tour for next month. Agatha, that's wonderful! Shannon exclaimed. You deserve it. And I also signed up for an art class, I continued. I've always wanted to learn to paint, but I've been putting it off and putting it off. No more procrastination. Life is too short to put off the joys of life. I totally agree, Shannon raised her glass. Here's to a new life. We clinked glasses, and I felt the anticipation of new adventures and discoveries fill me. Yes, I had lost something important, intimacy with my son. But I gained something equally important, self-confidence, new friends, and the freedom to live my life the way I want to without looking back at other people's expectations and demands. When I got home, the first thing I did was call the roof repairman to see how the work was progressing. He assured me that everything was going according to plan and the roof would be as good as new by the end of the week. I also called Clifford Jensen, my old friend and colleague, to inquire about his grandson's health. To my delight, the treatment was yielding positive results and the doctors were optimistic. In the evening, I sat down at my computer and began planning my trip. Paris, Rome, Barcelona, Vienna. I had always dreamed of seeing these cities, walking along their streets, tasting the local cuisine, touching the history and culture. And now, finally, I could afford this luxury, not only financially, but also in terms of freedom to make my own decisions. The next day, I met with a group of seniors from the local community. Shannon advised me to expand my social circle, and I decided to take her advice. To my surprise, I found some interesting people there with whom I had a lot in common. One of the women, Lillian, was a former literature teacher and shared my love of classic novels. Another member of the group, Richard, had recently returned from a trip to Europe and was happy to share his impressions and advice. You should definitely visit the small towns in Tuscany, he said, showing me pictures on his tablet. They are much more authentic and less crowded with tourists than Florence or Rome. I listened carefully to his recommendations, making notes in my notebook. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was part of a community, connected to people by shared interests and experiences, not just obligations or family ties. At home, I started sorting through old photo albums and mementos I had kept over the years. Some things I decided to keep, they were too dear to my heart. Others I gave to charity or gave to new friends. I was making room not only in my closets, but also in my life for new experiences, new memories, new joys. I tried not to think about Hugo, but his image still crept into my thoughts in the quiet evening hours. I remembered him as a little boy, a teenager, a young man full of hope and ambition. Somewhere along the way, he had lost himself, forgotten the values Arthur and I had tried to instill in him. Maybe one day he'll find his way back. Maybe he won't. But I wasn't going to let those thoughts poison my life anymore. My new life was just beginning, and I was going to live it to the fullest, with the joy, dignity, and independence I'd earned and defended.